Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Popeye from Down the Rabbit Hole, PopeyeRadio.com, and FederalJack.com. Wanted to shoot a quick video to point something out and send you all in the right direction to get a little bit more information, a little bit more in-depth information about a current story. So, massive sinkhole contaminates Florida aquifer with radioactive water. I'm sure if you've been paying attention to the news in the past few days, you've seen that the Mosaic company, which produces phosphate fertilizer, which is part of the much larger phosphate mining industry here in Florida, the Mosaic company recently, the past few days, came out and said, we found a sinkhole in one of our phosphogypsum stacks. And all the contaminated water that sits in the top of the stack leaked down into the aquifer. But don't worry, the drinking water is perfectly fine. It's only slightly radioactive. It's not really that bad, so it's okay. You should be okay. You should be okay. It should be fine. Really, we promise. It should be fine. But it's not fine. In fact, this is something that I discussed with a former plant manager who was a supervisor. His name is Gary Pittman. And I interviewed him back in February of this year, actually talking about the phosphate mining industry in Florida and all of the problems, contamination, health, pollution of the environment that are inherent with phosphate mining and the phosphate mining industry. And he shared his personal stories from being in that industry, and he is now disabled because of his exposure to these toxic chemicals, vapors. You'll hear in the interview how the secretaries that worked in the office, now the building was on the same property, but it was, say down a little ways, but nevertheless, it was on the same property where Gary worked. And the secretaries, their pantyhose would literally disintegrate just while walking through the parking lot because of the crap that was in the air. Imagine that. The glass on their windshields would get pitted. He gets into it. He gets into it in more detail in the interview, and I'll show you a picture of the interview in a second. I'll bring it up. Here's another article from Zero Hedge about it. Look at the size of that hole. I think it's got to be, I think they said it's like 40 feet across. It's huge. These are all the different news reports. There's the Florida Aquifer. You can see some other shots here of how big this is. Here's some track hose, right? Excavators. And this is the side of the phosphogypsum stack. That's big, Popeye. No, that's nothing when you look down here and realize there's the excavator. There's the sinkhole. Here's all the contaminated water that was in there. These things are enormous, these phosphogypsum stacks. So, here's one of the news stories on YouTube. There's the picture of the Mosaic plant. So, in this interview I did with Gary, you can see it right here. It's available at federaljack.com. You can look up the interview date, which is February 17th, 2016. Go to PopeyeRadio.com and just download the audio from there if you want. You can go here to Federal Jack to the post, and not only can you listen to it, if you click play here, it'll open the player. You can get Gary's book by clicking here, You can also listen to it on YouTube, and then this will take you to the downloadable archive. So all the links are right here on this one Federal Jack post with the article. If you really want, just go here. And I suggest you get Gary's book. If you want to learn anything about what's really going on, not just, oh, there's a sinkhole in Florida, some contaminated water went into the aquifer. This isn't the first time this happened. This happened back in 2009 as well, and it's happened other times. Gary talks about it. In fact, I'm going to play a section that I have saved right here from the interview I did with Gary. I'm going to let it play, about 7-8 minutes of it, just a snippet, where he talks about what's in the gypsum stacks. And he gives an example of another time that a sinkhole opened up. Now, remember, this was done in February of this year, so this was long before this current sinkhole. It was 7 months ago. So, 7 months ago, we had a conversation, Gary and I, about this very type of incident happening, and he explained how it happens. So you'll have a better understanding of how that huge hole appeared and what kind of stuff was in the water and why it's radioactive. You'll have a little bit better understanding just from listening to the snippet, but I suggest if you really, really want to take the time to learn and have a really good understanding of what's behind that sinkhole and Mosaic and the entire phosphate mining industry and the dangers that go along with it, I urge you to listen to this full interview over on my YouTube channel or, again, over on federaljack.com. Here's the title of it on YouTube, The Dangers of the Phosphate Mining Industry and Fluoride. And again, over on Federal Jack, it's Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye, February 17th, 2016, The Dangers of the Phosphate Mining Industry and Fluoride. And there's good old Gary. Anyway, let's get to the audio/video clip, shall we?
Now, there is other mines in the United States. There's some in North Carolina. There's some up north. I think there's one in Iowa, and there used to be some in Texas, but most of the phosphate mining is done in the state of Florida.
And it's still being done, like, actively to this very day in 2016?
Yes. Matter of fact, they've shut down one mine here and one chemical plant, but they're still running one. But Mosaic's still going strong in Bone Valley, and they're still acquiring land. They're still mining, and and running their chemical plants. And there's several organizations down there that are trying to, the same thing, and they're trying to stop the poisoning of the ecosystem down there. But the phosphate industry is very, very, very strong. They have a very strong lobby, and it's going up against the phosphate industry is almost suicide. But people are trying, and it's a very nasty business. Just the nature of the business itself, destroys the earth and the ecosystem, and they claim that they reclaimed the land, but the land will never be laid back down the way it was naturally.
No, like you and I were discussing off air, the layers of sediment and everything took thousands and thousands and millions of years to settle and create the perfect environment for life to grow, and then these guys come along and tear that up within hours and then destroy all of that.
Yeah, you take, they mine thousands of acres of land, and, the first thing they do is they go in and cut down the trees, the forest, push up the stumps, clear the land off, and then they make a pit, and then they mine the, of course, the topsoil, the subsoil, the clays, the sands. There's underground springs there. They go right on into them, right on through it, limestone, and basically they throw this matrix, we used to call it, and it's the phosphate ore. It's got sand and clays and different things along with it, and it goes into a pit. It goes into the mining area, into the washer. Then it goes into the float plant, where they float the rock off the top, And the sands and the clays go to the bottom, and they pump those off. And then, of course, the rock is ready for processing in chemical plants.
You were in a documentary titled Fluoride, Poison on Tap, and you and the filmmakers actually did something that was amazing. You guys they took a drone and they flew it around one of these phosphate mining plants, one of these areas, and then you were able to look at the video footage and point out what this stuff is. And I mean, I had no idea at all. I mean, you could look at it and go, yeah, that's a pile of something, or that's like a dam built to hold a pool of water, but you don't know what's in there. Whereas you were able to explain like the dark brown water in these huge pools that they have. Those are called stacks, right? The big white piles of sand with the liquid piled up in the top of it.
Yes, those are called phosphogypsum stacks.
And in those stacks, what is that nasty brown liquid that's sitting in there?
Well, actually, the white part of that stack, which is dammed up around, and they make a pond in the center, that is phosphogypsum, which is the byproduct of making phosphoric acid. And the brown water you see in there, when a stack first starts, of course, it would be like, fresh water. But they use that water in the process in order to make phosphoric acid and granulated fertilizer. Anywhere they're using water, they're using that processed water. And as they use that water, it collects heavy metals, phosphoric acid, lots of fluoride, arsenic, mercury, chromium, you name it, it's in there. And it goes back in that pond, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's the reason those aerial shots in the movie, Fluoride Poison on Tap, it almost looks like cane syrup. It's so dark, or Coca-Cola. And basically that's just the impurities that water is picking up and taking back to that pond, going through the process, because in the phosphate industry, when you're making phosphoric acid, in order to make phosphoric acid, you're adding that pond water, you're adding sulfuric acid, and you're adding phosphate rock. The sulfuric acid digests the phosphate rock, and then it makes a slurry, kind of like a mud pie. And it goes through the process of digestion, of reaction, and then the last part of it is you come in and put it on a filter, a huge rotating filter, and it pulls the phosphoric acid through the filter claws and into the receivers, which pump it to the product tank, and then that white part that's left is either dumped off or screwed off, slurried up again, and sent back to the stack, phosphogypsum stack. And there they have a drag line that goes around that stack, digging that phosphogypsum out and stacking it, around on the dam, so to speak. The problem with a lot of that is a lot of that stuff is escaping from there. A lot of it's through the air and evaporation, especially in Florida. It gets real hot here in the summer in Florida. The evaporation of that water sends fluoride up. And also, the stacks, the phosphogypsum stacks themselves, are leaching, because Florida is like a sponge. Most of Florida is sitting on top of limestone, and anybody that knows what limestone looks like, it's a very soft, white, porous rock. And as those phosphogypsum stacks leach, the water is slowly leaching down. That very acidic water is eating away the limestone, and once the limestone gives way, you'll see it in the movie, and you can look at the newspapers around St. Pete, Tampa. These sinkholes will fall in because they've eaten the limestone away. Once that happens, this toxic pond water is in the aquifer. And, that's just a terrible thing, because, that's where we get our drinking water from, and we, believe me, you don't want to drink it.
In the documentary, you actually show a case where this happened down here at one of these phosphate mining plants, where in this one of these gypsum stacks, this very event that you just described happened, and there's this huge sinkhole in the middle, and it looks like it drained the whole pool.
Yes, there was one down there in Central Florida, and we had one up here just a few years back. And basically, in the movie, one of the shots that was taken showed a helicopter flying over it, and you can just see the size of the hole, in comparison to the size of the helicopter. Up here, when the sinkhole caved in, there was 87 million gallons of toxic pond water that ran out of that phosphogypsum stack into the aquifer. And, it's a sad situation because it's getting harder and harder to find clean drinking water. I think the event in Flint, Michigan up there just taught us all a little lesson. But it's going on all over the country. The pollution is getting so bad that it's going to be hard. I worry about my grandchildren, one day not having, fresh water to drink.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. I suggest you listen to the entire hour and 43-minute, well, I guess hour and 44, because it's like an hour and 43, 35. So an hour and 44-minute long interview I did with Gary. It's his only radio interview to date. It was his first, and I know his only radio interview that he's done. He was interviewed by the filmmakers of Fluoride Poison on Tap, which I used some of the footage from in the YouTube archive of the broadcast you just saw. Great documentary. I suggest you go watch it. Fluoride Poison on Tap. Great documentary. Put together exceptionally well. Full of information. Definitely one of the videos that I would suggest if you don't know about fluoride or the phosphate mining industry and the dangers that they pose to your health and to the environment. I suggest you watch the film. Also, get Gary's book, Toxic Torts. Again, if you go to the Federal Jack link, it's right here. It's right on the front of Federal Jack. If you go to Federal Jack and you go up to over here on the side, you just click on DTRH with Popeye, all the posts that are posted under that category will come up, and this is one of the first ones in there. And again, you can listen to it. You can go to the YouTube link. You can go to the archive page. You can go right here to the downloadable archives, popeyeradio.com, and I suggest you do just that. Go here, and February 17th, 2016. It's only 7 months ago. Go back, rip the entire interview. You don't have to watch the video if you don't want. I suggest you do, because the video on YouTube, as you saw, it does have some video in there, and you can actually get a visual of what Gary's talking about. But if you only have time to listen to it, go over to popeyeradio.com or click right here, and it'll bring you to popeyeradio.com, and you can download the full show. Again, February 17th, 2016. This is Gary's book, Toxic Torts. I'm going to open it up really quick so you can see it. Phosphate Fluorides Toxic Torts. And it's not that expensive. Of course, it cut the price off over here, but you can see it's $18.96 for paperback. I have a copy of it. I suggest you buy a physical copy of the book as well. I promise it's worth it. It's definitely an eye-opener. I learned a few things, and I've lived in the state for over 10 years, and I didn't know that this was going on in the state of Florida at all. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the state don't know what's going on. And that story of the sinkhole opening up as of the past few weeks, and it coming out in the news the past few days, I'm sure that's a shocker to many people here in the state of Florida and countrywide. Now you will all have a better understanding. So go check out the show I did, The Dangers of the Phosphate Mining Industry and Fluoride, and listen to what Gary Pittman has to say. Gary's a good man, and he has courage, endless amounts of courage, and a brass set of balls that wouldn't fit in a dump truck, because he was willing to write that book and tell the truth. And you'll hear more in depth about the power the phosphate mining industry has, politically, monetarily, who they can buy. Go check out Gary's book. Again, Toxic Torts. The full title is Phosphate Fluorides, Toxic Torts. You can get it over on Amazon.com. And check out the interview I did with him back in February of this year, February 17th, 2016. Knowledge is power, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that. Knowledge is power. Now, as I always tell you, I love you all and I believe in all of you. The solutions to our problems are most definitely an inside job. Go out and be the superheroes that I know you all are. Go out and be the change. I'm out.